You joined Wix in what year?
In early 2007.
And what was your job?
I was the guy who was getting coffee. A very healthy and strong organization is an organization where people feel strong enough, empowered enough to make decisions. If you want to build such an organization, you need to view your job as a manager as someone who's giving service. It's not a status. So you remember our campaign?
I do. It was the first of its kind, is my recollection.
110 million people were watching.
Such a good thing you had such good investors. Wow.
Having great investors really helps out.
Which is a good segue to the most recent acquisition you made, where I guess it wasn't hard to integrate because it was one guy. So you want to tell us about Base 44? Welcome back to another episode of Invested. I am thrilled to be here with my longtime friend now, Nir Zohar, the president of Wix. Welcome, Nir.
Thank you.
Nir wasn't always the president of Wix. He had previous jobs there, which we'll get into soon. But Nir, before we get started, I need to ask you, tell us about your very fancy coffee cup.
It's not that fancy. It's just a paper cup.
No, but it looks very pretty.
It's a paper. It's like black coffee, Turkish coffee. Are you allowed to say Turkish coffee in Israel now? I think you're not. It's a black coffee. I made it home and put it in my cup and brought it over.
That's not an average paper cup.
Well, you know, have you met my wife?
I have.
You know, so my wife leads design at Wix.
Yeah. We should say that before she was Nir's wife, she was at Wix.
That is true.
Yeah.
And anyway, you're allowed to marry people you work with.
I'm in favor.
So everything in my life has to look
Beautiful.
beautiful and highly designed. So it goes also to the paper cups.
Your wife is amazing.
She is.
Okay. What I want to start with, Nir, is the middle of Wix's journey, and we will go back to the beginning.
I think the middle is now.
Good. I want to go back to what I think was an absolute turning point at Wix.
Mhm.
I want to talk about the Super Bowl commercial.
The first one.
Should we start with the Super Bowl commercial?
Yalla, let's do that.
Okay. Why did Wix decide to do a Super Bowl commercial?
It seemed like a good idea at the time.
Did I think it was a good idea? And I should say, for full disclosure, I was on the board of Wix and an investor in Wix.
Did you think it was a good idea? I actually think you did. Didn't you?
I did,
You did.
but I was worried because
Well-
it was very expensive.
Yeah, for
So-
sure.
Okay. Why
But
did
everyone
you
was
decide?
worried.
Yes. Why did you decide at Wix to do a Super Bowl commercial? It was like 6 years into the company.
It was 6 years in the company. It was a year and a bit after the IPO. So it was the campaign itself took place early 15. We went public end of 13. And we figured out that there's, we were doing tremendous performance marketing. Tremendous, really. I've met this woman just now, the president of EMEA in Google, who used to work in YouTube, and she said, "I remember back in the day, I was in YouTube. We were just releasing our new capabilities, and you guys were stretching it like there's no tomorrow.
Yeah,
You
we're going
kind
to
of
come back to that.
You kind of invented all of the things we're doing now with everyone. You guys invented." And so we were doing tremendous performance marketing. But we also figured out that we want to seriously create an uplift to our brand recognition. Now, back then we were also doing TV in North America, and it was working and definitely helping out. But we wanted to create a pivotal event, something that really creates something different. And we recognized that the Super Bowl can be a great opportunity for that. As you said, it was scary. It's a ton of money. Back then, today it's more expensive, but back then it was about 5 point something million just for the spot. But then you're going to spend another roughly 5 million on the production and creating something that's worthwhile to put in the Super Bowl. And for a company of our size back then, well, for any company, $10 million spending on one ad is a lot of money.
And you were just public for about 18 months.
We were just public for even less than 18 months. Obviously, we were scared of some criticism, which was actually not that significant. But I would say more than that. We had, I don't know, $130 million in our bank account. So $10 million cut out of that is a lot of money.
Agree.
Now, the rest of the marketing we are doing on performance. So for every dollar going out, I know exactly when I'm getting it back in. and I can manage that.
And so how did you justify to yourself to do the Super Bowl commercial, and how do you know that it worked?
Well,
Because I think there's a lot of innovation here, which is why I wanted to start with this.
I think the core motivation or the core justification, so to speak, was that it's a risk worth taking. You could say $10 million after 100 and something is a lot, but it's also it's not a make or break kind of a thing. We were cash flow positive, so it wouldn't put a dent in our cap that we cannot recover from. So the risk was not that big on the financial side. And the justification was, as I said, we wanted to create a very significant uplift in our brand. And you have to remember, for a company that does a ton of performance marketing, an uplift in the brand is something that is measurable, a bit not in the same ways, not immediately as your advertising, but over time, because you're essentially getting more recognition on organic traffic, which then allows you over time to decrease the amount you're spending on performance marketing and see if it covers. By the way, it doesn't mean that you need to lower the spend. You can then decide, do you want to invest more and grow faster or invest less? We did do one thing, or we take an approach, I would say, that was a little bit different. The decision was kind of a last-minute decision. It was taken pretty late in 2014 when the ad is in February and you have to submit it about a month before. And we then decided that in order to make something big out of it, and because we're a tech company, we're an internet company, our specialty is how to do things online. We don't want to just have a spot on, in the first week of February on the Super Bowl. We want to create a campaign that can be relevant for, a few weeks before and a few weeks after. So you remember our campaign? You remember
I do.
You remember what we've done?
I do. And I think this is part of what's interesting, because I think it was the first of its kind, is my recollection.
I cannot say for sure, but it was definitely not something that was done. We didn't see a lot of it around us back then. What we've done is, first of all, we wanted to reduce production costs, but we wanted recognized faces. And we went out and we got 5 Hall of Fame NFL players who were retired. Now, NFL players who are retired in most cases are not stars anymore. They don't do commercials. They don't come with a high price tag. So I would say Brett Favre probably came with the highest price tag, and everyone else was significantly lower.
Former quarterback of the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah. And essentially, we told the story of these 5 Hall of Famers who retired from football and are now reinventing themselves and building small businesses for themselves, which are kind of aligned with who they used to be. T.O. was, humble pies because he was known to be very arrogant, things like that. And
T.O., the famous wide receiver, Torland.
That's what I got you for, you see?
Has to be an American.
You have to be an American to quote all of those. So we created new businesses for each and every one of them. And we started advertising their businesses for real, like before the campaign went up as a Super Bowl campaign. And in some cases, people actually thought it's a real business. So we got orders for cakes. We got asked requests for business development. Brett Favre was supposed to open up a charcuterie, and we got this small boutique mustard company that wanted to partner up with his charcuterie. So it was really cool and started creating a lot of noise separately before we started kind of connecting the dots. And that campaign started, I think, early January. So a month before the Super Bowl, we were already out there and starting to cover ground. And then as we were getting closer to the campaign, we actually aired the spot before the spot in order to make the full-blown noise before we got to the Super Bowl itself. And we managed to create, I would say, almost 7 to 8 weeks of a superb campaign, so almost 2 months of a very strong campaign running around this. We also got lucky. We were assigned a spot, which was the 2-minute break in the fourth quarter, which is, if the game is done, then there's nobody watching anymore. If it's a very close game, then this is the peak of viewership. Luckily, we got the peak of viewership. It was a very, very close game.
If my memory serves me correctly,
I think it was actually won after the 2-minute break. So that was like, I think 110 million people were watching.
if our memory serves me correctly, we also waited until late November to close on the spot to kind of drive the price down.
Yeah, of course, because we are Israelis. We have to try and haggle. I think on a third campaign, we had a 30-second spot ready 6 months before that. The team, our CMO, essentially said, this one we keep. We don't use it for anything else, for the regular activities. We just put it, in a drawer somewhere. And he waited, and I think he closed the spot like 4 days before the Super Bowl. And they just pulled it out and
Leave it
over.
to Omer.
Yes.
Leave it to Omer. We'll come back to him in a second. So now let's go back to the beginning,
Yep.
the humble beginnings of Wix. You joined Wix in what year?
I joined Wix in early 2007.
And what was your job?
Office manager, I think, maybe. I'm not sure if there was a title, but yeah. I was the guy who was getting coffee.
You're the guy getting coffee. Employee number?
Maybe 7 or 8 or 10, something along those lines.
And you've been there 18 years?
Yeah.
And when were you promoted to the COO from the coffee maker?
About a year in.
About a year in.
Summer of 2008.
And the co-founders of Wix were Avishai Avrahami and his brother,
Nadav,
and Gig Kaplan.
Yeah.
And they brought in young Nir.
Yeah.
To be the coffee maker. And a year later, why did they promote you to be the COO?
Well, they didn't bring me to be a coffee maker naturally. Let's not exaggerate, but they did bring me to try and just create order in a chaos and try to basically cover the things that they either didn't like to do or weren't good at. And
or with Avishai could be didn't want to do also.
Yeah, that he either didn't want to do or just weren't good at, or a combination. Because sometimes you have to do something and you're not good at it, which is the worst kind of task there is. And so they brought me in. I've known both Gig and Avishai since I was in my early teens, so really for many, many years. And when they brought me in, company, as you said, was very, very small. So if you think about things that are not product and innovation itself, there's everything else, which is what in a big company you have, like a function and a full department. You need HR, you need finance, you need legal stuff. You need salaries to go out. You need cleaning in the office. You need someone to be the VP R&D, just in the sense of not saying, making sure that things happen as we said they're going to happen and are ready on time. And, in that year, I was all of those. So
why were you qualified for the job?
I don't know. I don't think I was.
Listen, it's a serious question. I think there's young people starting out there. Yeah. How old were you at the time?
I was 30 up to 31. That's the year.
So what made you qualified for that job? That is not yet fast-growing startup.
I think it's a great question. Okay. I think some of my past experience, which we can talk about, which was not relevant in the sense that I've done the same thing exactly before, but I did things that were close enough on one end.
Such as?
Well, definitely military service. I was a chief engineer on a missile boat, the Naval Academy. Served for almost 6 years. So working tight environment, small teams, a constant lack of resources, having a ton of responsibility at a very young age with a relatively short training process compared to other. In order to be a chief engineer in the U.S. Navy, you need to spend 15 years of training. You bundle all of those together, you can very easily apply them to how to start a company and run a company. You'll probably use the exact same language and the same words. It forces you to be agile. It forces you to know how to work very well with people, how to arrange and fix things, whether it's fixing relationships and, friction between people, or fixing whatever actually is physically broken. It's the need to learn very, very fast new things and adapt quickly to things and focus on what really needs to be done. Sorry, not about emotions or ego, etc. And I think all of that really served me extremely well going into that. Funnily, the next job, it was a job. I had after my army services, I went and I worked for the Jewish agency, and then I came back to Israel and I worked for the Israeli Scouts. And there's something fascinating about that as well, because unlike the army, where at the end of the day there's authority. If you tell someone, if you're an officer, you tell someone to do something, even in the Israeli army, they do it. Although there's much less formality in the process. When you try to work with teenagers and tell them what to do, well, you have teenagers. You try to tell them what to do.
Mine are getting older right now, but
but
you have a
you've
bunch
been
of
there.
teenagers.
Yeah, but
I've been there.
It's a coin toss, right?
And by the way, just to clarify for everyone, the Israeli Scout Program is a youth organization among many youth organizations, youth movements in Israel that devolves a lot of responsibilities and a lot of pioneering to Israeli teenagers. And
You can, by the way, you can say what the country was founded on the back of these youth movements, and they retained a lot of that legacy of how they try to train you to become a productive and effective adult
and leaders.
And leadership for sure. By the way, I think you see both in if you look at the military service in Israel, if you look at a lot of companies, many of the leaders and the officers are ones that have also had deep experience in youth movements. That being said, at the end of the day, if you're working with a teenager in a youth movement and you tell them what to do, it's not the same kind of authority. You have to be much more sophisticated and smart in convincing them that what you want them to do is actually what they want to do, which again I think is a great training for life and for working with people. Helps you put yourself kind of in the back seat sometimes and just try to navigate people without actually having your hands on the steering wheel. And I think all of that really helped me in my early days of
pause for a moment, because I think one of the things we focus on this podcast are the values that create economic value. Your story is atypical in some way. 6 years of military service, and then many people run in and do a startup right after the military service here, but you took a bunch of years out and did community service for the Jewish agency or in the Scouts program. Why'd you do that? And did you think at the time that you'd end up in high tech?
I did not think I was going to end up at high tech, but to be honest, I wasn't really thinking career at all. So maybe not really serving the economic value personally or alternatively at that point of time. I was extremely active in youth movements before my military service. Mentally, I saw my military service a little bit as a continuation of my activity in a youth movement. So getting back to it just kind of was on the same timeline, so to speak. And I liked it, and I thought I was pretty good at it. So I wanted, I felt comfortable going to a place where I think I can contribute and do things that I deem as important.
Was it helpful in your management career?
Wow, tremendously.
Why? Be specific.
To my management career? Because of all of the skills we discussed, I think.
I thought you were going to say a lot of teenagers in Wix, but
yeah, I would say some parts of Wix. Sometimes it's working with younger kids than teenagers. I think it helped me tremendously because of the thing we discussed before. I think a healthy approach to management, in my mind, is understanding that more than anything else, a very healthy and strong organization is an organization where people feel strong enough and empowered enough to make decisions. And you have a good enough process to overview and some oversight on decisions. Make sure that the ones that are critical and you have to oversee go through you, and the other ones don't. And you know how to make sure that every now and then you know how to feedback people and help them grow. And if you manage to balance this in the right way, you'll just have a much stronger organization. This is not about having people who are, happier. Okay, it's not about. This is actually not about community. This is about real good management of an organization, because the bigger the organization becomes, the more independent you want people to be. So things will just keep on running fast and not be dependent on you. Otherwise, it's just going to be slow to a halt. I think that if you want to build such an organization, you need to view your job as a manager as someone who's giving service, not as someone who enjoys benefits.
Mhm.
It's not a status. Well, obviously it is a status, but the key part of being a great manager is giving an excellent service to the people you manage, so they can be more independent. And I think this is definitely an approach that resonates extremely well with what I've done in youth movements. So that definitely, I think, was a big help in making me a better manager.
I want to come back to the notion of empowerment, particularly as it relates to the guild structure at Wix in a second. I also want to come back to why happiness is overrated at work and it shouldn't be kumbaya. We'll come back to that in a second. But speaking of that in the youth movement, when I got involved in Wix as an investor, one of the things that struck me was the offsite culture. I think I once called you and you told me you were in the water in Greece. And I said, on vacation? You said, no, working.
Yeah.
Explain this.
To this day, I think you have a hard time believing that we were actually working. I know that.
Except it happened like 6 months later again and 6 months after that. And
Yeah, but we stopped going to Greece. It was too cold. We started going to Thailand.
yeah.
We had this concept, we still do, that in order to get high quality time for the management team, we want to unplug them from their lives. And it doesn't matter if they're if you have kids, you don't have kids. It just pull you away from your surroundings. Try to isolate you to the best we can. Now, naturally, we don't take away your phones. You can talk to your family, blah blah. It's not real isolation, but definitely a very significant change of scenery. A significant change of scenery, which is far away, so it doesn't break every evening because you go back home and then come back the next morning. So it has to be abroad. And we have this concept that we want to do very long days of, taking a crack and at really tough subjects that we want to solve. Structure of the company, what's working, what's not, who's to blame, not in assigning blame, but in actually finding root causes so we can change things. What are the next big things we have to do strategically? How do you go about them? What are the key threats we have, and how do we mitigate them? These are tough things to discuss. They almost always take a long time. They almost always bring out lots of emotions. And in order to do it effectively, we want to be in an environment that is extremely fun, comfortable, and just lets people, digest and move through their emotions so they can get cleared up, and we can continue forward with constructive things. And effectively, the way we do it, we go to a warm, nice place. And we do sessions all day long. We start about 9, 10 in the morning, and we end up usually around 6, 7 in the evening. If you think about any manager who's had time with his management team for 5 days like that, is an extremely a high volume of time of management to spend time together. I run a kind of a strict show there, and I don't give them lots of breaks. They always complain. And we do it in the water. So we do it in the pool or in the ocean. We actually sit in the water and we talk. There's a few very significant values of doing meetings in water. One is, as I said, it's very comfortable. It's easy. You don't get uncomfortable sitting in some dark neon lighted conference room all day long. So you see the sun, you feel the wind, and you're sitting in water, and you can move around, and you feel comfortable in size. And another great benefit is even with all of the improvements done in the field, nobody feels comfortable bringing their smartphone into the water. So you get people's attention.
Those are the only two benefits?
They're big.
They're big.
They're big. Yeah. So it's been working tremendously well. And I'll tell you something else, Michael. There were a few years that this cadence of going on offsites was disrupted. You know, these small events like COVID, wars in Israel. And whenever we missed one, I could really feel the misalignment that's happening.
Wow.
We always try to do one in Eilat or do one in some pool in Tel Aviv or something like that. You don't get the same quality.
You don't get the same quality. Is it Thailand now every year when there's not COVID and not war?
It's Thailand or Seychelles because we're trying to, we're in Israel still, so going to the Caribbean is too long and too far. So we try to, these still are, not close destinations, but it's the closest tropical climate that we can get to.
I'm sure in the early days, some investor looked at that and said, that's quite an expense for a young company. Or did nobody say that?
No.
Amazing.
I don't know why. I mean, our first two, the angel investors, I think the first one we've done was already after we got the VC money. So the two more significant people in the board were the representatives from Mangrove and from Bessemer. Adam, I think you've had on this show before, from Bessemer and Mark Toulouse from Mangrove. And they were actually very smart and supportive about it. And when you joined, I want to say when you joined, first of all, it was already a habit, so you didn't have much to say about it. But out of all the things that you criticized and pushed me to do, you never had any pushback about it.
I wanted to be invited.
That's fair. That's fair. You all wanted, but there's some rules to it. So
the other thing about the Wix culture early on was the coffee.
Mm-hmm.
And there were all these things going on in Silicon Valley, free food and this, that, the other. But in Wix, there was like a coffee. There's always good coffee at Wix and beans and big machines. And it wasn't Nespresso or pods or crappy Starbucks coffee. There was, what's the deal?
First of all, we like coffee. And Israelis in general like coffee. We were a tiny startup. We didn't have a lot of money. Now, I just spoke about going to Thailand, so you're going to say, hey. Well, by the way, I once tried to do the comparison of going to like a high-quality place in Israel and feeding everyone and going to Thailand. Same price. You just waste a little bit more time on this travel, but you get the quality from, just from being there together all day long. We didn't have the money to, feed people for free. And, many of those perks came along later in the years. But when we were very small, we said we always want to focus on the things that are important and make a difference in people's lives. So, for example, coffee. We said people love coffee. We're not going to tell them what to eat, but we're going to make sure that they have really excellent coffee around because we know they drink it all day long and we're interested in it. So that was one of them. But we had another great rule back then. We were in Hashmonaim in Tel Aviv, and there was
That's right in the center of Tel Aviv.
Right in the center.
In a very rinky-dink building. If you go back on my Facebook post, you can go find a picture of Nir.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, today the whole area is become, the TLV mall is in front of it, so it looks much fancier.
Become gentrified, but back then it was a hellhole.
It was a hellhole, and the TLV mall was essentially a parking lot.
Yeah.
There were a few stores downstairs that actually sold computer equipment and chairs and such. And whenever a new employee came in, we said, you don't have a computer in the station and you don't have a chair. Here's a credit card. Go downstairs and buy whatever you like. And the idea was that the chair, the screen, the mouse, the keyboard, these are the tools of a tech employee. That's what he's going to be spending most of his day with, or in the case of the chair. Let's give them choice. The difference in price between the most expensive of them and the cheapest is not that big, especially when you're talking, 20 employees, 30 employees. Let's give them choice. First of all, it's cool and fun experience. And second of all, it's just, it makes everyone feel that they're getting the quality that they were hoping for and not something that we predetermined. We had that rule, by the way, running up to almost 1,000 employees, and then it stopped being effective.
Yeah, and then the business downstairs went out of business because you moved out of that building.
Yeah, this is also true.
So early on in the days of Wix, the company was based on a technology called Flash that almost everybody has forgotten. Flash technology was made by Macromedia. And by the way, Adam Fisher referenced it when we sat here.
Yeah.
In fact, it was a looked like it was deteriorating at the time, was going to be phased out.
Yeah.
Is a better way to say it. But Wix was built on Flash.
Yeah.
And just at the time, HTML5 was like in its early days.
Yeah.
And this was a real crisis moment. So I'd like you to take us through what happened, what you did, how you prepared, and how you kind of got past that moment and the company really started to grow.
So Flash is a really weird story in the history of technology in general. So, remember Macromedia were acquired by Adobe.
Yep.
Because of Flash. Flash was the most installed software on the planet. It was installed on 96% of the computers. When we started Wix, Flash websites were the thing because you couldn't do a lot of crazy visual stuff with HTML.
Yeah, this enabled you to do animations,
exactly,
moving websites,
and it had the value of working almost exactly the same on any computer or any browser because it was actually running on one piece of software instead of lots of different ones. So everyone wanted to have a Flash website. And in fact, lots of people were specializing in how to build sophisticated stuff in Flash because it was almost coding. It's kind of halfway coding. And the first and most exciting version that we got out of Wix back then was essentially letting anyone build a Flash website without having any knowledge and understanding of coding. People loved it, and they did tremendous stuff with it. And also lots of really weird shit with it because they could. And then a fight started between Adobe and Steve Jobs. He felt he was supporting them with their releases. They didn't incorporate some of their new capabilities for Mac back in the day for iOS with Photoshop and Illustrator. And he went to war on Flash, backing up HTML5 as the new standard. And we needed to understand which bet are we taking. Are we taking a bet on Adobe and this software that's on 96% of the computers on the globe, or on the crusade that Steve Jobs decided to declare on the technology?
I want to just put a fine point on this because people don't remember the history, and I think it's super important. Since everything in life is personal, this became very personal between Adobe and Steve Jobs, and he was determined to destroy Flash and also to free his Apple devices because they wouldn't support him. He was now going to free all the Apple devices
from Adobe in general, and definitely Flash as well as Adobe over time.
Exactly.
Which means that in 2008, when the iPhone came out, at the beginning it didn't support Flash just because it was early and they didn't have time to do it. But then on the second version, when it was about time to put in Flash and the iPad came out, he said, no, we're not going to be supporting Flash on our devices. Now, so it's not just betting on Steve Jobs. It's understanding that there's a whole movement here with these two extremely exciting new products, the iPhone and the iPad, with no Flash. And to be honest, it makes no sense for Adobe to lose. Okay, it actually made sense that because I remember there were actually ads of tablets that were showing that they can present Flash as an advantage versus the iPad in order to win the advertising and the sales. But we decided that there were two things that we were worried about. One is that Adobe was not very forthcoming in talking to us or to anyone else, and we were probably even back then the biggest distributor of Flash websites on the planet, and still they wouldn't talk to us. And it got us really worried that at the end of the day, our future is dependent on one company. Software controlled by one company. Whereas the news or the vision that Steve Jobs was bringing was that HTML5 is going to be so great, and he's going to put a lot of pressure to make it such because it's going to serve these two new devices. So they have to get to a high level of visual capabilities. And clearly it's Apple and it's Steve Jobs. So high quality visuals are important for them. So there's a good chance they're going to get to that.
To be clear though, Apple in 2008 was not Apple of today. The iPhone had just come out. Jobs a couple of years earlier taking $150 million rescue loan from Bill Gates and Microsoft.
Yep.
This was the first, after the iPod, this was really the first big release that was a connected device even.
True.
And so this wasn't obvious.
It wasn't obvious.
Yeah.
But the interesting part about that vision was that HTML5 was going to be a standard. It's not going to be a software owned by someone. And if it's a standard, it means that there are contributors all, from everyone. And we're not dependent on one software which belongs to one company. And we decided that we have to hedge our future by developing our HTML5 editor. Now, early on, we thought that maybe we're going to have HTML5 and Flash, and we'll see what works better, and then we make a choice. Clearly, first of all, once we decided we want to go down this path, we had a lot of debate internally, whether to do it, how to do it, lots of arguments with the board, whether this is a good decision or not, because the risk was that we had a business that was growing, and we were being successful early stages, and now we're going to have to rewrite the whole technology. Small company, we have to stop everything and only do that for more than a year, which is a big risk because business will slow down because of it, and we might lose ground or lose market share to competitors who are not going to be doing it while we're doing it. And it's a lot of risk.
And there were other competitors then, Weebly and
Squarespace
was early,
Yola. Back before that they were called Syntheside. I think back then there was also Moonfruit. There were many back then.
And this was a bet the company move.
I think it was actually a relatively easier bet because if we hadn't done it and stayed with Flash, and HTML5 would have gotten to where it is now and Flash died as it did, then we would have lost the company.
Mm-hmm.
But in a future where we would have done it and Flash would have remained strong and even won over HTML5, then I think that you would have recovered because you would still have the Flash website builder just with some
a year behind in features.
A year behind in the infrastructure and development. So I think, but we had to take that bet. It was still at the time extremely risky. You have to remember one thing though, is that we were running the chance that if business slows down significantly, we may run out of money.
Right. That's why I think it was a bet the company move.
Maybe our shareholders and VCs will decide to support us, or maybe they were going to say, hey guys, you made a bad bet and this is life, so go and start something new.
Such a good thing you had such good investors. Wow.
That is true, by the way.
That you can rely on. Yeah.
I think having great investors really helps out. Luckily, I think we made the right bet. And within 3 months or 4 months from the launch, already all of our new websites were being done on HTML, and no new users were added to the Flash. The existing users who were used to Flash kept on building Flash websites for a long time. And in fact, when did we fully discontinue the Flash websites?
I guess it's recently.
I think about 2 years ago. The last browsers announced that they're gonna discontinue support of Flash. We still had about 10,000 websites on Flash. People were unwilling to give away their Flash websites, and we said, "Guys, we're sorry, but they're just not gonna work on anything anymore."
It just tells you it's a story. I think that people don't understand how long legacy technology lasts in the system.
Essentially forever. Yeah, essentially forever.
Which is quite remarkable.
Yeah.
You fast forward now a couple of years, the business is doing this. My memory serves me correctly. It's about $60 million of run rate revenue, and you decide to go public.
Somebody was pushing me.
Well, let's 1 second. So this is what today certainly would be considered an early IPO, but even in 2013, This was an early IPO. Why did you do it?
I think it's, as always, it's a combination of a few things. First of all, we had this lunatic investor who took me, I remember I think it was very close to where we're sitting now. He took me to breakfast. You took me to breakfast on Chol HaMoed Pesach, on Passover. Um, I remember because it was a Passover kosher breakfast, and it was Zillow just went public, backed by Benchmark, and they went public very early, even earlier than Wix. I think they were like a $300-400 million IPO in value on the back of about $50 million in revenue or something like that. Very early IPO. And I think you were inspired by Zillow and gave it all the thought, and you set me down and said, hey, Nir, I think we should take Wix public, which completely threw me off because I've never even thought about the notion of going public. And I remember as we were done with breakfast, I called Avishai. And Avishai was on his way to the airport to go to San Francisco. And I said, Avishai, Michael just set me down for breakfast and told me that he thinks we should go public. What do you think about it? And he said, I don't think anything about it. I've never thought about it. I have no thoughts in my head about going public. Never did I have thoughts in my head about going public. I don't even know how to start thinking about it. To which I said, this is kind of also what I had in mind. But we were introduced a few years back. You introduced me to Noah Weintraub from JP Morgan, who ended up being our banker on the IPO. And I said to Avishai, listen, I met this guy who is smart, is a massive supporter of Israel, lives in San Francisco. I'll do a quick intro on the email, and while you're there, try and grab coffee with him, and let's start learning. I think it was April 2012, and we ended up going public in November 13. So this is pretty much the length of our thought and learning process. Over the summer of 2012, we wanted to raise money again. And we were really keen at having a high valuation because we wanted to raise a lot of money and we don't want to take too much dilution. And, we were at the stage where we can pick and choose. And it was funny. We went out on a roadshow for 2 weeks. And the first week was amazing. We had fantastic meetings. Everyone was extremely enthusiastic. We were sure we're going to get lots of very high quality, $500 million valuation term sheets. Then I think it was a Thursday or a Friday of that week, the first week, something happened, which was Facebook went public. Now today they are running a tremendous business. Back then the IPO was bad. They went public and tanked.
Stock dropped 50%.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, everyone in Silicon Valley was holding shares of Facebook. So all of the happy people we met on the first week were very unhappy people the following week. And we went back home understanding that this is a bad timing to try and raise money. And we said, oh, what the heck? Let's try and figure out this whole IPO path thing. So we had a phone call with the board and say, guys, we want to start pursuing it. Everyone said, okay, so can we go public next month? We said, well, no, because no one around this table actually took a company public, and especially not us. So we need to learn. We called Noah Weintraub again, who was assisting us in trying to raise money. And to be honest, we surprised him. He was sure that we are trying to figure out how to do another round in September after dust settled. Instead, we said, you know what, Noah, let's go down the IPO path. But since we're clueless, we need you to help us out. We want to talk to at least 10 CEOs who have taken their company public in the past couple of years or so, and should be closer to our size. So talking to a massive company will be obviously completely different. And through the fall and early winter, we went through this whole education path of talking to the bankers to better understand how things work, to talking with some of the investors who had experience with public companies, talking to lots of CEOs and CFOs who took their company public, asked them about they're happy, what they're happy about, what they're disappointed about, what they would have done different pre-IPO in order to be better ready post-IPO, what were their best experiences from the process itself, what were the worst ones, and basically started accumulating a whole lot of ideas, either good ideas that we wanted to replicate or things we wanted to make
Different.
sure that we avoid.
Yeah.
I think, one of the comments I got from the CFO of LinkedIn got us to make a real big effort on redistributing equity to all of these stars in the company pre-IPO, which was very, very painful experience. We diluted our existing shareholders by 11% a moment before the IPO.
And by the way, you should point out on long vesting.
Long vesting. Well, the management long vesting, the middle management regular.
Regular being 4 years, long vesting, if I remember correctly, being 6.
6, yeah.
Yeah.
And
I think it's a key point, by the way, because one thing to point out is that the core team of Wix, 18 years later, is still in place.
True.
People at the company well over a decade, some close to 2 decades at the company. And
now you're making me feel old.
You were 30, 31 when you started at the company. And that was a long time ago. It's just a fact. And the team at Wix, I mean, more than any other company I know, is still in place.
Yeah.
Very broadly.
Yeah.
Including the CFO, who joined right before the IPO.
Yeah, the CFO, including almost, I think there's only one senior manager that is joined after.
Right.
Everyone else was pre-IPO.
Pre-IPO.
Yeah.
Which is pretty stunning.
It's pretty stunning.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we learned a ton. We spent, the end of the year in 2012 learning, early 13 building kind of the array of bankers that we want to support us in going public, and then we launched in March 13 was the launch of our IPO that brought us to the November timeline. And it was, I think back then we didn't fully understand what we were getting into, to be honest. Because you have to remember, it's Israel. Today, it's much more common to meet an executive in Israel or not even somebody who grew up in a public tech company. This was something extremely common if you were in Silicon Valley. In Israel and in Tel Aviv of 2013, there were very few companies. We met Eyal Waldman, and we met
founder of Mellanox, was also on the podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, and we met Gil Shwed, but these guys have been public.
Checkpoint.
There were only 2 of them, and Checkpoint went public early 90s.
Yeah.
So very, very different stories. It was very hard to find people with the right experience around you to advise you. Again, today, much easier. And this is, I think, something we're actually very proud of. So we weren't sure what we were getting into. First of all, we wanted to raise money, which is one thing and a good reason to go public. The other thing we figured out through the IPO or through the process, even before we went public, which became, I think, a big part of the motivation, was throughout the years prior to going public, we got very generous offers to sell the company. At $250 million, at $450 million, at $1 billion right before the IPO. And we always said no. And we said no because we liked what we were doing. We saw a little bit of secondary early on, which was another great generosity by our shareholders to allow it and support that. So we weren't, tremendously stressed for immediate cash in our pockets for our personal lives. We really believed we can build something big, and we wanted to try to take a real shot at it. We figured out something. Somebody said that to me prior to the IPO. Itzhak Ben Bassat, who was back then on our board of directors and was fundamental in World of Warcraft. And he said, what are you mostly worried about? I said, well, I'm afraid of losing control as a public company. He said, no, you don't understand. This is the other way around. I said, what do you mean? I said, well, today you have 3 or 4 people who hold all of the shares or most of the shares in the company. And, luckily they're friendly and they support you and they trust you. But, in a different world, they can take over almost in a heartbeat. And companies go through that. It's not uncommon. It happens. When you go public, the last thing that the public investors wants to do is to manage the company. They want you to do it and they want to trust you. They will award you more if they trust you more, and then you'll be in a tight spot if they trust you less. But you will actually have much more control and confidence that in the control of the company than you have as a private company. And I think, the IPO ended up being really a pivotal moment in us growing up, becoming more serious as managers, and extremely well committed, because when you go public, you take equity for 6 years because you know that you want to be there from 6 years later. So it's a long-term commitment.
So I assume no regrets about going public, or are there?
No, not at all.
Do you advise other young entrepreneurs to go public early today or no?
I think it really depends on the company. I'm not sure about. I think for us it was the right thing to do. I think today the environment is a little bit different. It's easier to get money. You get more money at better terms than what it used to be back in the day. Remember when you joined the Wix board, Benchmark essentially came in and cleaned up all of the existing preferences and nasty veto rights and stringent rules that were in place in the company's charter. So I think it's a different environment today. I think there's a lot of value at becoming more mature to some extent. And I also think that it's easier today for Israeli entrepreneurs to mature as private companies than it was when we were going public. That being said, I still think it's a great outcome, because if you want to build something for the long term, if you have a vision, if you want to build a legacy, if you want to build a company that's gonna outlast you. So I truly, my dream is at some point, to retire because 30 years have passed since I joined Wix, and to have a great managers to run the company, and essentially, on my deathbed, to know that the company is still a big Israeli company that is doing great for the world. There are companies like that.
Yeah.
They exist. They don't exist in Israel because Israel is
75,
exactly is too young. But why not? And I think if you want to go down a path like that, not necessarily exactly like that, but like that, then you definitely need to take the company public at some point.
Of all the companies that made acquisition offers, are any of them larger than Wix now? I don't think so.
One.
Which is pretty stunning. Right before the IPO, you hired a head of business development and corporate development. His name was Dror, but his job was to do no deals. So I remember I brought him deals. He said, "Oh, thank you very much." And I said, "Did you follow up?" And he said, "I sent a no." What?
His job was to be polite. No, I'm serious. Listen, I think each company is different. We were a company that was established on something that was relatively rare back then in Israel. We built a direct-to-consumer product, which was extremely successful, relatively almost immediately, because was a massive need for it. And we did a decent job in our first versions to match that need with something that actually brought people value. And we had so much growth and runway that doing deals and working back then, today we're different, but back then trying to incorporate and build integrations and work with big companies and with big partners would slow us down tremendously. It's a small development team, and if you dedicate half of it in order to integrate your product into Google or into Meta or into anything, you're probably not going to get the same, well, not probably, you're definitely not going to get the same amount of value of just, developing the consumer-facing product and getting more traction. And you're going to significantly slow down development, and you're going to create a dependency. So back then, we were really trying to avoid partnerships. However, we were getting a lot of people who were approaching us, and we didn't want to be schmucks and ignore them. So we brought someone who can maintain relationships over a long period of time. By the way, some of those relationships turned out into partnerships 4 or 5 years later, when we were actually had the ability to raise our heads and take a breather and try to create those kind of partnerships. But back then, we just needed someone to be polite and maintain the relationships without actually having to do anything.
He could have been a better title. He could have been the CPO, the Chief Politeness Officer, or just, call him "Don't be a schmuck." It feels like,
Maybe that's what we called him
Code name.
at the office.
Code name. And which is a good segue to the most recent acquisition you made, which is like 3 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Where I guess it wasn't hard to integrate because it was one guy.
Yeah.
And some vibe coding. So you want to tell us about Base 44?
And the
Sure. How much did you pay for Base 44, first of all?
$80 million.
$80 million.
Mm-hmm.
For a guy.
For technology, for know-how, for a brand, for an actual product that is getting a ton of traction. By the way, it keeps on improving. So the past few weeks since we announced the acquisition has already shown a massive improvement in numbers. Again, time will tell. Talking about it, I can be very proud about it, a month after the acquisition, and then be very embarrassed about it in a year from now, in theory. I think I'm going to be very happy and even prouder in a year from now. But you know me,
Why'd you buy this
I'm always
company?
an optimist.
Why'd you buy the company? Want to tell them what Base 44 does?
Of course. So Base 44, you want to say it? Or
No,
should I?
you can do it.
So Base 44 is a company in an emerging space of vibe coding. Vibe coding is the idea and the concept that you use natural language to prompt. You write, I want to build a website. I want to build a component. I want to build an application that does something. Okay. My wife wanted us to build an application that will manage all of the kids' summer activities in one place on one calendar, that can accept either text in order to bring in, put in a new activity, or can also scan an image that has the data on it and put it into the calendar. You prompt it, you get it. You understand that you missed something or that you want to be able to edit directly from the calendar itself. So you then prompt it again and say, add this, add that. You can do it in Hebrew, you can do it in English. It's a really, really cool concept. And I think for us, vibe coding is extremely interesting for 2 reasons. One, I would say there are 3 potential outcomes, okay? It's going to go away. That's always the option, right? Something goes up fast and goes down. We've seen this. You've seen this. I've seen it many times. Obviously, we don't think that's the case, but it's an option. The other 2 options is that, let's call it the defensive option, which I less believe in, but it's something to be considered, which is in a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, most of the websites in the globe are going to be created by vibe coding. In which case, we have to be big players in it because it protects our current business that might be cannibalized by new technology. Goes back to kind of the HTML Flash decision back in the day. And then there's the third option, which I believe more in, which is a little bit like what Wix did back in the day when we kind of lowered the bar of who can build websites. Because when we started Wix, you remember that you had to be, in order to build a good-looking website, you had to be a professional. You had to know how to code either Flash or CSS at a high enough quality in order to create something that looks tremendous, looks well, and you had to go back to the code every now and then whenever you wanted to make a change. And the whole idea about Wix was we're going to remove all of that hassle. We're going to clean it up. We're going to take care of the technology. We'll just give you the user interface to do it on your own. Vibe coding does that for building applications, for building software.
Yeah, but can I do it with Anthropic?
Try. It's not the same. For
Mm.
Anthropic does a tremendous job when you're a coder who knows how to code and wants the coding be done for you. By the way, vibe coding is running on top of these models. Okay,
Yeah, of course.
it's a simplification. You can say, can you have done it? Can you just give people Flash? No, I gave them Wix.
Yeah.
Okay, I took the more complicated technology and I simplified it for people who are like you and me and who don't know how to code.
Are you putting the Wix marketing machine behind Base
What?
44?
What's that?
The secret weapon called Omer Shai
Yes.
Who's the CMO
He's deep in it.
at Wix.
And now he's also CMO at Base 44.
At Base 44.
Yeah.
How much money have you put behind marketing Base 44 since they've arrived? Because he put none behind it, Shlomo. More Shlomo, sir.
I cannot divulge a number, but I would say it's a good number and it's on the rise.
And it's growing.
Yes.
You feel like you've repaid the purchase price already?
I think I repaid it in value for sure. We'll get it.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen it in cash yet, but
Got it.
I'm going to get to it.
So this is a one guy company.
Mhm.
And Wix has always been about what I'd call the little guy.
Mhm.
I remember a very difficult decision on the eve of the IPO to turn off Syria because the U.S. government required that you couldn't go public if you served customers in Syria, even if they were the little guy. In Syria.
We were really trying to find any loophole and to try to avoid that, but eventually it was very strict, so we had to do it.
Yeah. And so the Russia-Ukraine war breaks out.
Yeah.
Wix has a lot of employees in the Ukraine.
Yeah.
A lot. I want you to talk about two things. One is the decision to cut off Russia from Wix.
Yeah.
And number two, what you did for the Ukrainian employees of Wix.
Sure. So I think the first one is actually cutting off Russia was a hard decision. And it was a hard decision, again, because, big powers are fighting. And, in theory, you can say, the Russians are the bad guys. By the way, I'm sure they are the bad guys. And anything that supports them should be removed. So it's an easy call, just remove it. But as you said, at the end of the day, the people who are using Wix are not. It's not the Russian.
Vladimir Putin is not using Wix.
No, he's not. Right. It's the simple people in the simple town, in the small towns, or in Moscow, whatever, who are using it for their small businesses. Okay, they're not part of the power play, and they're going to suffer. That being said, I think it's an extreme case where. Unlike the situation with Syria, where we were trying to fight it because it was just, it was a government regulation.
Yeah.
Here, there were lots of little guys on the other side who were also suffering, and they were also not part of the struggle, and were being hit over and over again, which were the Ukrainians. And we thought, that in the grand balance of things, okay, the right thing to do is to cut off our relationship, or the business relationship we have in Russia. Wasn't an easy decision. We knew that there's a downside to whatever we're gonna decide, and we decided to go with that in that direction.
How many customers were affected?
I think paying customers are a few tens of thousands, probably.
A real number.
And free users, hundreds of thousands. So real number, yeah.
And talk about your Ukrainian employees. So how many employees did you have in the Ukraine on the eve of the war?
Eve of the war, we had 900 plus Ukrainians. Some of them were already, so we had two groups that were already outside of Ukraine. One was, we have it also in Israel. We have this relatively small group of people which are mapped as kind of under the BCP guidelines of the company, the Business Continuity Protocol. Meaning that we know that their function is almost unique, and if that person is unavailable, then it's going to be hard to try and recover. So we're about 20 or 30 of those who, a few weeks before the war, we said, guys, tension is amounting. We would love for you to take your families, travel. We'll sponsor it. Go to our offices in Krakow. We bought
Poland. Yeah.
Yeah, we bought a small U.S. company that had development in Krakow, so that's why we had offices in Krakow. It's not very far from home, and hopefully things are going to calm down and you're going to go back, but we'll sleep easier if you're there rather than in Kiev right now. But then really like a week and a half before the war started and tensions were really going high, we said, this looks bad. Let's try and create an insurance policy here and help people out. So we said to all of our Ukrainian employees, we are chartering planes. You can get on the plane with your immediate family, so spouses, and if somebody has an older parent that they want to bring, obviously they can, definitely kids. We've rented a space in a whole resort in Turkey. It's February, so it stands empty. So we took the whole resort in Turkey, and we're going to fly you to Turkey. It's a short flight, and you're going to spend the next few weeks there. Let's see what happens. We had about 180 employees, I think, that took us up on it. Ended up flying about 300 people because they came with families. We chartered a couple of planes, and we took them out. And they were in Turkey when the war started, so we had these people who were outside of the country. And then essentially, once the war started, everyone were fleeing from eastern parts and central parts of Ukraine towards the western parts. And we knew that they were going to try and cross the border. Ukraine shut the border for the men 18 and 60, up in the age range of 18 to 60. But we had lots of female employees. And essentially, we started by creating places where they can stay in the western parts of Ukraine to be safer. And for anyone who managed to cross the border, we really had like a war room that convened on a regular basis, try to find out where everyone is, make sure that they can travel out. Got transports, rented out transports from Dnipro and Kiev to move them westward. But for those who passed the border or they crossed the border to Poland, we had drivers from Lithuania, employees from Lithuania who got into cars and just drove down. It's like I think 1,200 kilometers drive to the border to be there and move people from who crossed the border and transport them to Krakow. They were actually waiting for them with food and blankets and sometimes baby food and clothes because people were traveling. It was really a fugitive experience. People were in their cars, like fleeing the from one side of the country to the other in winter. And then when they got to Krakow, we started building. My team didn't like when I called it, but I called it. We were trying to build a kibbutz in Krakow, in the sense that
Which kibbutz?
in the sense that we were trying to get people together in a place where we can also create layers of community to help each other. People were coming with kids. People were super tired with spouses. We wanted to make sure that there's, activities for the kids. We helped them with slowly getting into the education systems in Poland. We at the beginning, we gave them a stipend to rent out houses and places. At the beginning, it was, early on, it was Airbnbs and hotels. Then we switched to apartments. Help them with all of the local stuff because you're now coming and you need to establish your presence in your country where you don't speak the language and you need to sign a Polish contract. You can read the contract, right? So we try to take everything into account and create the right environment for them to ease up a horrible experience to the best of our ability. Either for the Ukrainians who are stuck within Ukraine and set up places for them in western parts of Ukraine closer to Lviv, or alternatively the ones who got out to set them up in Krakow. At some point, we took the guys from Turkey and moved them also to Krakow. And
how many people do you still have that were physically in Ukraine?
Physically in Ukraine, I think we're roughly 500 plus.
And now in Poland?
We're hiring, you have to remember.
You're still hiring in Ukraine?
I think about Ukraine, some of my Ukrainian employees are bigger Zionists than some of the Israelis I know. And I try to be the same, to have the same approach about Ukraine. So I'm a Ukrainian nationalist, essentially. I really believe in Ukraine. I think it's an amazing place. I think when the war ends, they have a chance, which I hope they're going to take, to rebuild their country in a way that's going to be so much better than it ever was. The people there have proven massive resilience and a huge loyalty also to the company and to its values. The amount of support they gave us when the war started in Israel is unbelievable. So we are hiring. We just built a new design hub in Ukraine with 50 designers.
Where?
We announced it in Kiev. We announced it in January. We have 30 plus employees out of the 50 that we want to hire, and we're going to get to 50 in a few months. So I think Ukraine is still going to be very big for us, even in the long run. And we have another, I would say, roughly 300 Ukrainians who are working from outside of Ukraine for the time being.
Poland.
Mostly in Poland. What's going to happen when the war ends? Will they return or try to stay in Poland?
And how many total people in Poland?
Without Ukrainians?
Yeah.
Well, there's like 14 Polish people in our... It's tiny.
In Krakow. Okay.
Yeah, it's tiny.
So I don't think there's anybody with more wartime COO or president experience than you, because you've now done Ukraine, Russia, and Israel.
Yeah. But I feel like I'm done. I don't need another one. So I'm good.
What would you tell a startup CEO in Israel or Ukraine or someone who might end up in another war zone? Like, what's the 2 or 3 biggest piece of advice you can give them? And here, by the way, you ran with people in reserve. They had people running away.
People running away?
There in Ukraine, you had people running away.
Yeah.
Here you had people in reserve duty.
Yeah.
Like, what would you say?
I think that first and foremost, especially at the beginning, in the early days of any conflict, forget about anything and just worry about the people. For 2 reasons. For a few reasons. One, if you try to get them to work, they're not going to work anyway. It's hopeless. Because their mind is going to be distracted. We've seen it now with the conflict with Iran here in Israel. There was 2 weeks. That war lost 2 weeks. There's nothing to do about it. Okay. Some people would like to work because that's how they get their mind at ease, and that's great. Allow that. Mm-hmm. But you will notice that everyone who's not called for any kind of service is going to be and is unable to work. Maybe the best thing to do is to try to get them involved in helping out the other people. It creates an amazing amount of goodwill between people. It creates tremendous loyalty between the company and the company's values and the teams and employees. And I actually think it's good business, because if you're playing a long game, and I think any entrepreneur should think about themselves as playing the long game, think about the employees that you helped in this crisis.
Let me just interrupt you for a second. Like, you've been through 2 wars, over 1,000 people affected at a company of how many people?
No, more than 1,000, because you have the Israelis,
right.
About 3,000. So about 4,000 in a company of 5,000
people. Have you missed a quarter yet?
No.
You haven't missed a quarter.
It's a public company. Something is above or below, but they never missed a quarter, no.
You haven't missed a quarter? Missed the delivery deadline?
Adapted, changed delivery deadlines. I think, when the war started, we said, okay, let's try and obviously in some teams that are responsible for critical stuff.
Yeah.
Now you're missing people because they went on reserve or they're away for any kind of other reason. And then you say, okay, I want to boost that team with other teams. So there's always priorities, right? So you take lower priorities, you're willing to take that they're not going to come out in the regional timeline, and you attach them to the more important stuff.
Think you're a better company today than you were before the war?
I think for sure, but I don't think I should be naive about the fact that had there were no wars in Ukraine and Israel, I would have delivered faster. That being said, we launched Wix Studio, which was our flagship product for 2023, on October 15, 2023.
8 days after October 7th.
8 days. And we said, we have to do it. By the way, we announced the Base 44 deal smack in the middle of the
12-day war.
The 12-day war. Yes, by the way. Yeah. And everyone loved us for finally giving them some news that didn't have to do anything with the war.
Yeah.
Um,
When they were scrolling on their phones in the shelter in the middle of the night, they saw good news.
exactly.
So I want to go to two quick last questions. One,
Yeah.
I want to take us full circle back to the beginning of the conversation. You talked about empowering people.
Before you do, I just want to say one other thing about those people you help in a crisis, Ukrainians, Israelis, doesn't matter. First of all, you get their loyalty. They would make a tremendous effort for the company whenever they can because they know you know that you've done the same for them when they needed you the most. And even if it's someday they leave you, because that's life and it's fine and people are supposed to go on they will always be your best ambassadors. And that's super important, especially in an industry that is so reliant on strong and smart talent.
Yeah. Great point. Mark Toulouse, who's your pre-seed investor, basically, or seed investor, has been the chairman of this company for 18 years at this point almost?
Yeah, something like that.
And he's still your chairman.
Yeah.
Tell us about this in 60 seconds.
Well, I think it's a remarkable thing. Usually VCs, put money in the company. They stay with you a few years after the IPO in the best case scenario, and then they exit the shares and then exit the company. Because why have the responsibility if you don't own the shares anymore? Mark is remarkable in the sense that he held shares for a long time and maximized an amazing return. Unbelievable return. But actually, it's been many years now since they lost. Mango sold all of their shares, and Mark is still on the board and leading the board. He is, he just became part of the Wix DNA.
And an incredible guy.
Did
he get invited to the offsites in the water or no?
No, because it's only management. But I want to say something about Mark Toulouse in Israel, okay? He's been, ever since the war started, I think he's been to Israel like 10 or 12 times in a very short period of time. What's the first time he got to Israel after the war started? He was here early December. Rockets were flying in Tel Aviv left and right. He was here on the ground, just coming to show support. So his understanding of how to support entrepreneurs and how to support us was unbelievable. And he just carried on with it and evolved with it to what Wix is today.
It's really incredible and it's worthy of admiration. And he's not only an incredible investor, he's just an incredible mensch.
Yeah, exactly.
Early on, you talked about empowering people to do their best work and setting them free and just kind of managing the process around them. I want you to tackle this in two ways. One is the guild structure at Wix and how you built that. And the second thing is you serve small businesses. Mm-hmm. And so the whole business is about empowering
that is true
people to go do this. And to talk about that and the kind of the state of small business, and after that we'll wrap.
Yeah, sure. So I think the restructuring of Wix that was done in 2014, right after the IPO, there were a lot of values that came out of the new structure, but it was first and foremost was trying to serve the ability to make faster decisions. Okay, now there's a whole list of other things that came with it, but first and foremost was about decision making, and I'll explain. We were growing. At the eve of the IPO, we were about 450 people in the company, out of which about 250-ish were in the kind of the production cycle, product people, UX, and mostly developers. And part of the reason we went public and we wanted to raise money was because we wanted to double up and grow to about 1,000 people, which took us about 18 months to double the size of the company. And when we thought about it, we said, okay, we don't know how to manage an organization, an R&D organization that is, we're at the limit of the size that we know how to manage. And we don't really understand how to manage the next size up. And already now we got to the point where, when you want to make a big decision on a new product, so the head of UX wants to say something, and the head of front of development wants to say something, and the head of the server development wants to say something. And you have at least 3 very smart product people who want to say something, and you have 2 founders that definitely are going to say something. And you end up in this long string of slow decision-making on the most important capabilities and features in the company. The smaller ones are easier because people don't have an opinion or are not that strong of an opinion, so it's easier to move. But actually the important stuff is the stuff that it's hard to make a decision on. And the worst thing that can happen is that you end up having a ton of compromises. So you end up building camels instead of horses. Um,
He's referring to a camel is a horse made by committee.
Exactly.
Go ahead. Yeah.
We said, let's change that. Okay, let's try to encapsulate teams in a way that decision-making can be made in a very clear and easy manner. Let's create teams that are essentially like small startups within the company. And because we're Israelis and we usually are not great at naming things, we ended up calling them companies. So within Wix, there are companies, okay? And they're heads of commerce and head of Wix restaurants and a head for the editor and a head for the Wix studio, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the idea was that they will get the full-blown resources they need in order to take their task from A to Z. And I'm going to talk about the values of the resources in a second, but at the end of the pyramid or at the top of the pyramid for the company is going to be a head of company, which is like a CEO. And we'll appoint someone from the management team as their chairperson. And now we have two people who can make any decision on that product. And that's it. And if I or Avishai have complaints, we can argue about it later, but they can make the decision. They're smart enough to know that in some decisions, they want to come and seek our advice. But they can make any decision. And we have somebody to fight about making bad decisions, which is fine, but it's not a committee that voices their opinions. Now, it also allows us to encapsulate talent and create expertise, because if you're working in a certain company in Wix, that's where you are, and I cannot just pull you out and put you somewhere else. Well, I can, naturally, but I try not to, and other than me, almost anyone, no one else can, which means that people stay in one place. They don't move around all the time. In the older days, whenever we had a new project, we'll take the best talent and move them around to the new thing, and you keep on getting, V1s of things, never getting to the high quality V2, V3, or V4 where real value lies, because frankly, V1 of almost any product I've ever experienced is lousy.
Mm-hmm.
I owned the first iPhone. It was a horrible product. So we managed to encapsulate talent. We managed to solve the decision-making process, which was horrible. We also managed to understand how to build a methodology of professionalism that we didn't have before. Because essentially we said, okay, now what are we going to do with, the guy who was leading the server guild, the server team before we did this change, he's the strongest server developer in the company. Now, before we did this, he was mostly managing tasks and applying people from one place to the other, blah, blah, blah. He had very little time to actually deal with, teaching people, creating methodologies, improving. Said, now let's take this person. Let's take this guy. We pull him out. We make him responsible of the server guild. So if the companies are vertical, then the guilds are horizontal. Mm-hmm. Okay. And no matter who you are at Wix, you belong to a professional guild. And even if you work in a certain company, there's a professional guild behind you that takes you out every couple of weeks and teaches you something new, and we can comment about your level of professionalism and seniority, and are you getting better, and helps in the recruiting process and bringing us the best server people into the company, and making sure that we actually, if somebody, maybe you're not doing a great job at a certain place, but you're a great professional. And the guild can say, this guy, the dynamics in his current position is not the great one, but let's not lose the talent, put him somewhere else. Or alternatively, this guy is already moved in 3 different places. He's just an asshole. We have to get rid of him. Okay. So you have suddenly the horizontal layer that allows you to actually create methodology and keep on improving the company. Now, actually back then it was mildly important. Today it's extremely important because we're a big company. I want all of my UX people to have a standard. I want all of my designers to have a standard, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I also want the guild team to be the ones who are trying to figure out what's new. How do we improve everyone by, learning a new technology or something that has changed in our world, because they're researching all the time, bringing it in, understanding how to apply it to our own needs at Wix, and then how to distribute it to everyone and improve the whole company and not just bits and pieces.
How is AI going to affect the Wix customer and small business growth or shrinkage in general?
Mm-hmm.
And then how will it affect Wix?
Well, I think it will.
Are you bullish on small business,
I'm bullish on small business for sure.
even in the era of AI, or more so?
I think some roles in some businesses are going to go away
Yeah.
naturally. I think others are going to actually flourish.
Yeah.
Okay, and definitely services and anything that's physical.
Mhm.
Okay, well, maybe robotics will also change that over time, but time will tell. This is not something that's just not the next couple of years. I think that the work environment within tech companies is going to significantly change because of AI. I think people are going to have to readapt habits of self-learning and curiosity.
Are your team members all using AI coding help?
They are all using something,
Mm-hmm.
and we are doing a massive internal effort
Mm-hmm.
to create new methodology and experience where it's not only everyone uses AI, but also the flow process between the different disciplines, from product to UX to R&D, incorporates different pieces of AI functionality or AI capabilities that creates a cohesive work process that fits a bigger company and not only
You
a
see
small team.
productivity increase already?
Already seen a productivity increase, but I think the big one is still ahead of us.
Bullish on small business around the world, or bearish?
Bullish.
Very bullish?
Yeah.
You see it in the economy right now?
I see it starting. Yeah,
It's starting.
Yeah.
Business
starting. We're not fully back on to where before. I think they're still suffering, and it's still economy is still very volatile, and sadly they feel it before anyone else.
Small businesses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't have cash reserves.
The last question I ask everybody, who's somebody you want to highlight who you think deserves more attention than they get right now?
Globally, just in general, even?
A person.
My wife. Always.
Fair enough. Nir Zohar, thank you for joining.
Pleasure.
This is great.
Thank you, Michael.
If you enjoyed the podcast, please rate us 5 stars on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and we're going to add to the show notes the links to the Super Bowl commercials because you'll enjoy watching them. Thanks for joining.